Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Helen Harrison with the Northwest Eco Building Guild. I'm here with Grace again, who is assisting in session support today. A quick note to better view this presentation, you can minimize your chat screen off to the right by selecting the green arrow in the top right corner, and to enlarge any screen that you see in front of you, you can select the 4 arrows in the top right corner. I'd like to take a moment to honor the land we are currently on. On behalf of the Guild, we acknowledge that we're all on traditional land of the first people of this region. We honor with gratitude the land itself and thank the tribal people who have been faithful stewards of the land, water, and ancient history of life. Here in Seattle, where I am, we occupy the Duwamish. Peace, dignity, and equality on a healthy planet. This from the United Nations is simply stated, but deeply resonates with our committee as we think about you and the need in our communities at this moment. We believe that you are the group of people to set an example for how to support one another and move through this time together to arrive in a better place. Now we thank our sponsors. Our sustaining sponsors for today's event is King County Green Tools, Dunn Lumber, and Pharos Creative. Here you will see our supporting sponsors, too numerous to mention, but we couldn't do this without them. And finally, we thank our contributing sponsors. All of our sponsors help make this event possible. As many of you are familiar with Remo, some of you, maybe this is your first session live. After we turn off this presentation, you will come back to the floor plan that you see below you on the screen. If you have any issues with your mic or your camera, you can select the bars in the top left corner and check your microphone and camera. You can also ask somebody at your table if you're having trouble. And lastly, you can find somebody that's got a yellow star next to them, like enlarged in the picture on the right. These are our session hosts or our event hosts, and they can help answer any questions you might have. But very often you can solve a lot of problems simply by leaving the session and popping back in. We're going to hold our Q&A session or questions till the end of the session. If you can post them in the Q&A session or section of the chat screen, Grace will also be monitoring the chat as well for questions that you may pop in there. This course is AI approved for 1 CEU. If you haven't picked up your CEU reporting form, you can grab it as well from the chat box. I think Grace is going to post it there as well. I'm excited to introduce our speaker for this session, Green Bridges for All, Ellen Southard. Ellen has 29 years plus experience in the green building industry and is a founding member of Cascadia Green Building Council. Her firm Site Story has worked with Salmon Safe for 9 years as the organization's alliance partner for urban projects and strategy in Puget Sound. Ellen, please join the virtual stage by turning your camera and mic on for us.
There. Hi. Good to see everyone, and thanks for including me, and thanks for listening about this project. It's really unique situation. It's a very it's very unique, like the Pacific Northwest is, and I'm excited to share it with you. So I'm going to pull up my presentation now, and we'll get started. So the project is called Green Bridges. It's something that Site Story has been running with Salmon Safe since 2016. And like I said, it's a very unique situation of looking at how polluted stormwater impacts salmon migration corridors. And as you know, we have a lot of bridges in our state, and we have a lot of salmon migration corridors in our state. And salmon are really adversely impacted by roadway runoff. So that is truly what this project is all about. And I also want to thank Weber Thompson, who helped prepare some of the graphics for this. So we have been working with a group called CLU, Clean Lake Union. It is a private developer, Mark Gray, with Stephen Gray and Associates, who manages a lot of properties for Susie Burke and their own properties, investment properties in Fremont. And they were attempting to do Salmon Safe at the Tableau headquarters that opened in 2017 at the corner of 34th and Troll. They were pretty far into design when they started talking to Salmon Safe, and frankly, they weren't based on that design, weren't certifiable. But the owner had a brilliant idea that he had seen the work of Professor Jennifer McIntyre from WSU Stormwater Center in Puyallup, and had learned about her research of spawning pre-mortality and the impacts from the 520 bridge. So this is Jen, and Jen is kind of a Pacific Northwest hero in terms of stormwater. She does a lot of her research with NOAA. And the image that you see on your left is a sheen of polluted stormwater that is at Mark Gray's office, actually, over by Westward. He owns the Westward site at the Westward restaurant. And so right around the same time that he was working on this project and trying to figure out Salmon Safe, he noticed this oil spill and became really concerned that maybe one of the boats at his marina had leaked, but it actually was coming from roadway runoff. And there's, I believe, 154 street outflows that impact Lake Union. And these are frequently seen conditions of the lake. So Mark really kind of took the bull by the horn, both at the bridges and at the lake, and created a group called Clean Lake Union. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of bridges in Washington. There's 1,500 bridges managed by the state, 102 by King County, and 150 managed by the city of Seattle. So that's a lot of bridges. And the real challenge here is that in the consent decree with the state of Washington and the Clean Water Act, a federal act, we get a hall pass on managing the stormwater on bridges. And it really became a concern of ours when we learned about this issue, because, you know, the most frequent swimmer under a bridge is salmon. So that is the conundrum that created the impetus for this project. So our partners are Boeing. Boeing has been a substantial funder. They funded all of the design and all of the community outreach. And when I mention community outreach, a significant amount of outreach was done and managed by Site Story, as well as the Nature Conservancy, to bring together the Department of Ecology, SDOT, SPU, and WashDOT to get them to find a permittable pathway for private landowners to be treating stormwater in bioswales or through bioretention on private land. And so I had mentioned Clean Lake Union. Weber Thompson was the landscape architect for the original 3 projects. KPFF is the civil engineer. And as I move forward, Site Story will become a 501c3. We are already siteandwater.org, and our fiscal agent is the Seattle 2030 District. We've also had a multitude of private donors involved, mostly the tech community in Fremont. We raised about $400,000 from the tech community, a little over $250,000 from Boeing. And then thankfully through Gail Tarleton and Reuven Carlisle, we were able to get a $1.5 million legislative budget that's run through the Department of Commerce to help us build 3 of the bioswales. So as I mentioned to you, this work was really inspired by the work of Jen McIntyre and her research on 520 Bridge. That turquoise blue column is the results of the 520 research. The red and green are the results of all of our water testing at the Aurora Bridge. And then we also, that purple column is the California highway mean. And the reason why we did that is our research scientist, our stormwater specialist, Dr. Rich Horner, who is UW Emeritus, is the one who won the lawsuit against the California Department of Transportation for their pollution and runoff. And he works for the National Resource Defense Council. So as you can see, what's coming off the bridge off the Aurora Bridge is 5 times what we saw from the 520 bridge. So a little bit about the Aurora Bridge. It was the first bridge in the country that was dedicated entirely to automobile traffic, whereas other bridges had all been designed for multimodal transportation, including, horse and buggy and bicycles and railroads. But this was the first bridge of its kind that was built only for automobiles. And it does have a unique formula for its steel components in terms of its structural integrity. We do believe those columns that you saw a minute ago, the red and green columns, that the zinc and copper that's being contributed to the stormwater runoff is most likely from the bridge substrate. And again, another picture of the Aurora Bridge. This was the first car to cross the bridge, and where that car sits now is the Getty headquarters. And then, of course, the bridge had a new life and became kind of a destination in Seattle when the Troll was built. And now this explains why the Volkswagen under the Troll, in case no one ever knew that. It was interpreting the history of the first auto-focused bridge. So data 1 is what we call phase 1. This is the first project that was completed in 2017. It has a beautiful cascading bioswale. It's a 6-chamber bioswale, and each chamber has a Corten steel divider. Corten steel is safe for marine habitat. The rust helps seal it up, whereas other metals would be required to be painted or dipped. Corten steel naturally seals itself and is safe for salmon. And we've done a lot of artful work there, thanks to the beautiful design of Weber Thompson. So if you walk along, you'll see different education tools that help you understand what is happening along the bridge. As I mentioned, this is a 6-chamber bioswale. To date, all of the research that we've done, we have not found polluted stormwater in the 6-chamber. As a matter of fact, we haven't found any sitting water in the 6th chamber. Most of that water is being treated through the first 3 chambers. And then this is the Watershed Building. This was the first, by the way, the Tableau headquarters is LEED Silver and Salmon Safe certified. And then the Watershed Building, which we refer to as phase 2, is the pilot Living Building Challenge project with the city of Seattle. And it will receive living petals. Unfortunately and ironically, it will not receive the water petal of the Living Building Challenge because the city of Seattle's code precludes collecting and reusing stormwater runoff from human-occupied terraces. So here's a little bit more of the water diagram and how the water comes down from the bridge into the bioswale, but also how it's collected and reused for irrigation. Any overflow that might occur then gets distributed to the bioswale as well. But we don't see that that will be a regular occurrence, because once the building is occupied, it's likely that it'll use most of its rainwater for toilet flushing. And then this is a bird's eye view of how the two bioswales cascade down the hill together. So it's quite interesting. And we have interpretive signage at the Watershed Building as well. And again, the Watershed Building is Living Building Challenge and Salmon Safe certified. So what does this look like cumulatively? So phase one, data one, is 1 liter or downspout. In the case of bridges, downspouts are actually called liters, and it's treating 200,000 gallons per year. Phase two at the Watershed Building is 2 downspouts, and that's 400,000 gallons. And then our phase 3 project, which was just recently completed, is actually treating 1.235. So the 3 phases together are just shy of 2 million gallons per year. And you can see the area of the bridge that we're treating. So it's approximately 4 acres, much of which is sent back. And the third phase, the phase 3 bioswale, is actually 4 downspouts. So what's in that water? If you look the cup to the left, it's very coffee soupy like, and that is what that water looks like when it comes direct from the bridges, and that is the kind of pollution that was feeding directly into Lake Washington Ship Canal. The center photo is, like I said, just collecting stormwater off of the 3 chambers. And at that stage, we have treated 70% of the pollutants that are coming from the bridge. And then you can see a side-by-side comparison. And then again, here's a bird's eye view of the new bioswale that was recently completed down by the Ship Canal. Part of our construction strategy was to redirect the downspouts aerially into the bioswale so that we didn't have to dig up the Burke-Gilman Trail and interrupt all the bike commuters. So that was a big goal of ours that we were able to achieve. The species that are moving through the canal include Chinook, sockeye, coho, kokanee, and then the steelhead rainbow and bull trouts, which stay in the fresh water. So they remain in the canal and go back up to the lakes, whereas the others go out to the Pacific. The Chinook and sockeye make up 82% of the orca diet. Chinook is 82%, and sockeye is another 10%. Chinook is on the endangered species list here in the United States. Sockeye is on the endangered species list in Canada. We have not been able to move that forward under the current administration in terms of making it an endangered species. The coho, however, is what a lot of us eat, or where there's the greatest population, and it is it's typically what commercial fishing operations are fishing for. The coho, once they're exposed to this polluted storm water, will die in 2 hours. So they never, what I mean by pre-spawn mortality is they never make it to their spawning grounds. And that is the research that was done by Jen McIntyre. Jen McIntyre's research, and if you'd like to check it out, there's lots of videos online. But what her research has proven is if you can treat stormwater through bioswales and rain gardens, you're likely to have the salmon survive. As a matter of fact, most do. In the case of the coho, once they are exposed to that stormwater, they become disoriented and they start to suffocate. They lose their senses, and some of them go blind. So it's a really sad ending to a beautiful life. Now, just to help you imagine how hard the salmon work, the Pacific salmon go all the way out of the Puget Sound, out to the Pacific waters, some as far as Alaska. And then when their life is coming to an end and they're coming back into their spawning grounds where they were originally hatched, they have to come through that ship canal and all the way into all those different streams and creeks. So that's their migration process. It's really a lot of hard work. You can see the salmonids from the Lake Washington Cedar River watershed. We do not have a lot of the coho and sockeye in this watershed. There's actually not a lot. And like I said, the coho and the trout are the bigger population for this watershed. So what we're looking at is all 6 bridges on the Ship Canal. I mentioned that legislative funding. Starting from the west, looking at the Ballard Bridge, and then the Fremont Bridge, the Aurora Bridge, the I-5 Bridge, the Roosevelt Bridge, and then the Montlake Cut. And that funding that we have from legislator, $500,000 went into the Phase 3 bioswale under the Aurora Bridge. And then we have $1 million for bioswales at the 2 approaches of the I-5 Bridge. We will eventually be moving forward with design concepts and fundraising for the other bridges as well. One of the concepts we're looking at for the Ballard Bridge is in consideration with the Friends of Street Ends. They have management over the 14th Street End by PCC Markets in Ballard. And one of the reasons why we are looking at a more temporary solution there is because we know that Sound Transit is going to be building a bridge adjacent to the Ballard Bridge. And sometime over the next 10 years, the Ballard Bridge will also be replaced. With that in mind, we want a semi-permanent condition for treatment, likely splash boxes or Gradix boxes, rather than building a permanent bioswale, because we know that those agencies are going to be using that area for construction staging of the 2 new bridges. So in all, if we were to be able to get bioswales built on both sides of all 6 bridges, we would be able to treat 98 million gallons of stormwater a year. And considering that the city of Seattle has set a goal for treating 700 million gallons, we've got them, a seventh of the way there, basically. And we are working pretty regularly, thanks to the Nature Conservancy and Boeing, to try and convince these agencies to do more and to help fund this work. And again, to date, the only public funding we've had is through the legislature. So this is a drone shot of the new bioswale through the bridge structure. And the bridge was recently painted, so it's looking pretty good. And here's a couple of the design features. Again, we have those metal weirs and have a cascading system as well at the new Phase 3. Sorry, those are a little pixelated. One thing too, part of the landscaping scheme at Phase 3 is that we'll have color all year. And so we also have witch hazel there that blooms in January and February. We have a lot of different colored leaves in terms of the plant selection, most of which are native indigenous plants to the Pacific Northwest. But the idea is there's some color to look at every time you visit the bioswales. Fast forward, what I'm calling Phase 4 is the Trolls Knoll Park. If you check out the chat room, I did put a survey in there because we'd love to have anybody participating in this. Take the survey for us and weigh in on their thoughts of how to activate the space at the Trolls Knoll Park. Anyhow, this is in design now. We have just hired a landscape architect and we are underway considering what this park will look like and what the community would like to see there in terms of amenities. Given that given the steep slopes and soils condition under the bridge, at the moment we're not considering a bioswale, but we are considering the box systems for stormwater management. And WashDOT is really interested in testing that as a pilot project, and hopefully this will convince WashDOT to help fund that project. And then I'm really excited about the work we're doing from a social equity perspective. So we are also funded by Boeing to work in the Duwamish. And this work is extremely important to me. and it has great meaning to me in my life. The folks in the Duwamish are going to, from an actuarial perspective, are going to live 11 years less than the people in Fremont. There's so much air pollution there, and water pollution, and legacy pollution from the port industries and from airplane manufacturing and Boeing. And if folks aren't aware, the Duwamish is the largest Superfund site in our history, in the nation's history. So it's really important that we can transport this project to a community that needs it more than any other community in our city. This is the South Park Bridge. We kick off our public meetings for the South Park Bridge this Saturday. I'm really excited about it. Our first public meetings will be with 24 members of the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps. The work is being done in 6 languages, some of which includes, some of our content includes the Lakashid language of the Duwamish people and the Salish tribes. So we're really trying to incorporate tribal traditions and tribal culture and infuse that into the project. So we're really, really excited about getting this underway. When we wrote the grant to Boeing in the spring of 2019, we had no idea that the West Seattle Bridge would have its structural issues and that the Spokane Street Bridge would also be shut down as well. So sadly, the transportation impacts on the Duwamish are significant. They already had terrible air pollution. And now we're looking at, with the West Seattle Bridge and Spokane Street Bridge out, there's going to be a lot of tractor trailer traffic and, other kinds of large scale vehicles. And given the traffic jams that they're experiencing already, that idling will increase the amount of pollution that's there. We're starting to do water testing now. It's very hard to monitor a site during COVID in the sense that we know we're not necessarily getting the true results of that, of kind of the maximum amount of transportation impacts. I do want to mention too that we have gone back since the phase 3 project was completed and have started doing water testing there. And what it has shown us, we did some baseline testing in winter before COVID hit. But since that time, obviously transportation has slowed down significantly. What we have found is from the petroleum products and the things that are typically coming off of tire wear and vehicle fluids, vehicle pollution, that has gone down. However, the copper and zinc has stayed the same. So that is what gives us the confidence in knowing that the bridge itself is part of the pollution. So again, I've mentioned the South Park Bridge. The other bridge we're looking at, of course, is the First Avenue South Bridge. Now, this is very industrial land, most of which is publicly owned, either through ports or WashDOT. And we are starting to examine what would be the best sites for bioretention and where we can find a landowner to partner with us. We are considering vandalism and issues, social issues like that are likely to, again, turn to splash boxes or Gradix boxes. We're working with a couple artists. We hope to have an artist competition to help design what might be called the facades of the splash boxes and the Gradix boxes. There is an installation of Gradix boxes in Georgetown already. It's not quite a year old, but it's probably 9 months into operation, and they're seeing some great results in terms of how the Gradix boxes are working. Gradix boxes are like a dispersion system, so it's a dispersed rain garden in a box, basically. So that's the scoop on the First Avenue South Bridge. One thing I want to mention in our research that we did through KPFF. In the case of all the drawbridges, we have made recommendations to replace the grading systems for a couple reasons. KPFF found a bridge substrate. It's a resin-based material using recycled plastics, and it has a really high safety rating in the Northeast and in the Midwest, where there's heavy snow and ice. And so there's a lot less grab using that substrate. But the idea of that is that by using that substrate, we can also capture all the stormwater and send it back to the pipes for the bioswale treatment, rather than having it flow off the bridge and into the rivers and canals when the bridges are drawn. The other thing is with that, it has a really high life safety rating, and so there tends to be less accidents. It's also a great acoustical product in terms of noise pollution. So there's a lot of reasons why we would consider or encourage these agencies to use that substrate and replace the grading. Now, we won't be able to capture 100% of the stormwater because the bridge spans at the joints tend to leak, but we do believe we can capture, if we were able to implement the substrate and replace the gratings on the drawbridges, we do believe we'd be able to capture about 98% of that stormwater. And then again, I mentioned the Spokane Street Bridge. One of the reasons why this bridge, we don't currently have funding to research this one, but we want to. One of the reasons why it's important for us to look at is this is typically where people are launching their boats. And there's a lot of cultures in and around the Amish that fish for food. It's, besides the tribes, particularly the Vietnamese community. And this is their launching pad. So we've gotten feedback from the Amish community that they'd like to continue this project and look at Spokane Street as well. And then just to mention, the bioswales and the Gradix boxes are great in terms of elevated highway, and WashDOT is starting to consider more the ideas of treatment in elevated highway. We also have some private developers that are very interested, that have sites adjacent to the bridges and are interested in being involved and treating stormwater from elevated highway as well. So this project kind of has a life of its own that's continuing to grow. And I mentioned earlier how important the Chinook and the sockeye are to orcas. If we don't save the Chinook and sockeye, we're not going to save the orca population either, which is why I've turned my sights to some new bridges and are building new coalitions. We are starting to, just this week, started to kick off some coalition building in both the Skagit River and the Nooksack. The Skagit and the Nooksack are the two most significant migration corridors for Chinook and sockeye. And the Skagit is the most important to Chinook population here in the lower 48. And then we really can't divorce ourselves from the spiritual well-being and the cultural identity of the Salish people. They depend on the salmon for many reasons. Livelihoods, cultural identity, their food system. And so it's really, really important that we can do this work to support the tribal identity. The tribes are also deeply connected to the orca. And so from a spiritual perspective, this project is really important to them, and it's important to me from a cultural preservation standpoint, as well as a salmon recovery standpoint. And these are the folks of the Amish greeting some of their canoes. And this is during the canoe paddle every summer. So I mentioned the Amish Valley Youth Corps. This is our first meeting with the Youth Corps. There are a number of rain gardens in South Park. And so we did a walking tour of the rain gardens a couple weeks ago and have started to educate the youth corps. They are actually our outreach partners. So the youth corps, each member of the youth corps has identified 10 families that they will communicate with about these polluted stormwater issues and why it would be important for them to weigh in all of our community engagement meetings, to have a voice and to share their ideas. And so our meetings do tend to run a little long when you're trying to communicate in 6 languages, but we're really, really excited because, again, this is a community that has a lower lifespan than any other place in Seattle because of this legacy pollution and the air pollution that is there. I'm really excited to take the youth on Saturday. Some of them will be seeing the troll for their very first time. So they're going to tour the troll, they're going to see the bioswales, and then they're going to take the survey. And again, have really reinforced to the youth corps that they should think about participating in community events, sharing their voice, and weighing in on community-led surveys as really their first form of voting. So I look at this very much as an empowerment project for the youth corps. So our next steps, we're implementing that state proviso funding, and we're going to start to design the bioswales for I-5. We're constantly identifying additional funding sources. Weber Thompson is making a video, but I'm happy to announce that I'm making a video too that is being sponsored by PCC Markets. So while Weber Thompson focuses their video on the Lake Washington Ship Canal, Site Story will focus on a video with the Amish, and also some of the subtitles will be in Lushootseed language. And we're really developing a master plan of priority bridges based on human health, salmon, and orca recovery, and that is funded by the Bullitt Foundation. Salmon Safe would like to create a toolkit for bridge design using these projects, again, to inform that work. We've recently written a grant with Dr. Lynn Gould from UW. She also runs the Just Health Action Network and has done a tremendous amount of work in the Duwamish. And Lynn is going to help us understand the ecological and social impacts of these bioswales and how it's improving the health of the community. The Nature Conservancy is leading the way on an impact public policy piece. I'm working with them to develop a toolkit for governments to launch these projects, and to we're even helping them write RFQs. And then really trying to encourage the state of Washington, the legislative body, to create a fund for this bridge work and allow municipalities to apply for grants. And then I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself earlier, but as you heard, we've got these new projects in the Duwamish, the Skagit, the Nooksack, Trolls Knoll Park, and I-5 being led by the Nature Conservancy. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. You can feel free to email me at ellen@sitestorynw.com. We do have time for a conversation and to field some Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing now and move back into our remote conference room.
Stick around.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah. We're gonna stay in presentation mode for the Q&A.
Oh, you want me to bring it back up?
No, you don't have to bring up your screen, but we're not gonna go back to the tables just yet. We're gonna do Q&A first, because the benefit there is that the Q&A can get recorded here in presentation mode.
Great.
So we can't, yeah. So first question is, it looks like just the north part of the Aurora Bridge is being treated by the stormwater, and Laura's curious to know if treatment of the water on the south half of the bridge will happen, or why it doesn't happen now.
One of the reasons why it hasn't happened now is we don't have a landowner that's agreed to it. So it's publicly held land. Seattle Parks Department prefers not, unlike other parks departments around our region that are starting to use parks and open space as a solution for bioretention and green infrastructure. Seattle Parks has resisted that. And then again, WashDOT likes to reserve some land under the bridges for construction staging. So we don't know when that part of it will play out. The state legislature and the Nature Conservancy really wanted to prioritize I-5. So those will be the next ones that we start with public funds. And then Boeing has funded Clean Lake Union and Salmon Safe to start work on the Fremont project. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you.
Willing landowners.
Perfect. You need that.
I should say, though, is Site Story is partnering with the UW Green Future Labs. And so we're considering floating wetlands. King County, UW, and the Port of Seattle had floating wetlands in the Duwamish adjacent to some of the port industrial projects. And apparently the numbers are good in terms of treatment. And so Site Story is working with UW to look at, until the other bioswales get built under Fremont Bridge, is to have a 2-year project of floating wetlands.
Cool. Awesome. Carrie would like to know, when the Ballard Bridge is replaced, might the stormwater treatment be included in that project, or will it be unmitigated like the existing bridge?
So SDOT has made a commitment to treat the stormwater there, and they will be in charge of that design.
Okay. Laura states she finds the lack of or low number of no idle signs on all our opening bridges abysmal. How can we help change that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it comes down to who's managing the bridge. So I think, boy, I'm not sure where to start with that. I actually don't have any funding for that. When you're working as a nonprofit, you kind of get siloed into what your grant deliverables are.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question. And I guess one of the places I would weigh in, at least initially, is there's going to be a pretty massive public comment period for the West Seattle Bridge. And there's already a West Seattle Bridge Coalition. So I would be sending letters of support and remarks about that. I mean, that's a really cheap fix and something that could be done right away and should be done right away for South Park and First Avenue South bridges. I will think about that a little bit, because we are going to be having signs at the entry points, at the approaches of the bridges. So when people are sitting in traffic, they can at least see that we haven't designed it yet, but they can see that a project is happening or underway. I might consider seeing if we, right now, again, we have a limited budget, but maybe we could increase the size of our signs to include that. But I would definitely encourage folks to weigh in with the West Seattle Bridge Coalition and raise those issues, because get it in front of WashDOT. And I'll bring it up with the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. They are serving on the advisory board for the West Seattle Bridge redesign, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Christina would like to know, at some point, will the bioswales filter get so filthy and clogged that it will need to be replaced with new filtering material? That's
always a possibility. There's a couple ways you can go about it, is amending, replacing some of the soils and amending them. And you can also go about it by replacing some of the plants. I did all the rain gardens at the PCC markets, and they got built in 2008, 2009. The markets that have rain gardens, I should say, because not every PCC has them. Most of the PCCs, by the way, are leased. And so they don't own the land underneath. So it really comes down to the landowner being willing to meet some of the objectives of PCC. But none of the soils or plants have been replaced in any of those rain gardens. Now, we don't know with that concentration of pollution how long, but we're assuming right now that it's a 10-year fix, and then we'll amend it. In the case of Mark Ray's projects, phases 1, 2, and 3, he has agreed to do that himself. So he assumed liability and he assumed the maintenance. He's not maintaining the pipes, but he is maintaining all of the private all the bioswales on private land.
Awesome. John Alexander says, fantastic work, Ellen.
Oh, thanks, John.
To what degree will the pollution be reduced from the bridges as we transition to electric vehicles?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. So, a lot of it's based on maintenance. So there's a lot of tire wear in there, and that really comes down to whether or not the streets are maintained. So if they're not maintained, we will see less petroleum product, but we'll still see some auto pollution from the tires and anything that might drip. In the case, in the case of the Aurora Bridge, we're pretty sure it's the bridge itself that's leaching those materials. We'll know more as we start to test. And it's one of the reasons why Salmon Safe wants to develop a bridge design toolkit. In Seattle, we know about the Ballard Bridge, but also the Magnolia Bridge is going to be replaced too. So they're seeking out funding to create this toolkit that advises bridge design based on materials.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And then Christina also says this is awesome work, and thank you.
Oh, thanks, Christina.
Yeah. I think that's the last of our questions in the Q&A. I'm just going to check the chat real quickly.
Okay.
Carrie is excited that your work is expanding beyond the Fremont projects.
Which Carrie is that?
Carrie Anderson.
Oh, great. Hi, Carrie. So, yeah, I really want to encourage folks to weigh in on the Trolls Knoll. It's such an important part of the city in terms of a destination for locals as well as tourists. Now's a great time to share what's important to you and to help us think about that design. And then we'll start to have surveys for the other projects as well. But we'd love to have folks involved sharing their opinions. And then I've planted some seeds with the Guild of some ideas of how the Guild could be involved in the future. Salmon Safe has I'll just put it in the chat room, but Salmon Safe has a Green Bridges page where they're going to start to update information. And then Site Story will be updating the project too. It's a long haul. I'm frankly, when I talk to folks in other nonprofits, they're always surprised that we got the phase 3 bioswale built in 4 years. It seemed like a lot of commitment for me, but now I'm assuming that I'm going to be working on this for the last 12, 15 years of my career. I mean, especially in the Duwamish, it's just such a remarkable place with a remarkable history, and I'm really driven by having a positive impact on folks that have been marginalized over the years and underserved.
Well, thank you, Ellen, so much. We do have a little extra time, so I'm going to release everyone from the presentation mode. If you do want to take the next...
I was going to make a suggestion.
Sure.
Ellen has about 8 more minutes. She had a lot of ideas about what we could discuss at the table after this. Maybe we could talk about those ideas for a few minutes before you...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Jenny. Yeah, I'd love to kickstart it. So we are hoping, because of the legislative process, we're hoping to start to get some concept design for the other bridges on the Lake Washington Ship Canal. One idea I had was a team charrette with the Eco Builders Guild and get folks drawing and thinking about the bridges. One bridge in particular I mentioned, Ballard Bridge. One of the ideas I have, and in working with Friends of Street Ends, Friends of Street Ends helps manage through the Urban Tree Program and other grant funding. I think they have 15 street ends, or 14 street ends at different bridges in the city. And so the one idea I had in working with the Guild, because I think it gets into really fun, creative stuff that might motivate the public and really activate a space, but also could be a fun research project in terms of materials, would be incorporating those Gradix boxes and making a removable park, so that once either WashDOT or Sound Transit needs that ground for staging, the Friends of Street Ends could literally lift the park up and move it to another street end under one of the other bridges. So that was one idea I thought could be fun to work on with the Guild. You know, we always need funding. So if folks are part of impact groups, we'd love your help. You know, if you live in one of the neighborhoods where those bridges are, like Montlake or the University District or in Ballard, we're looking for partners for coalition building. It takes a lot of outreach to motivate the public and to get our donors on board. And one of the challenges that the state has provided is they would like to see 30% of these bioswales and any kind of placemaking that comes from the bioswales to be 30% funded by private sector. And so that's quite the challenge for building infrastructure with donations and private sector partners. So if anybody has any ideas or knows any donors or wants to get involved with that kind of coalition building, you can let me know. Again, it's Ellen at sitestorynw.com. I'll put it in the chat. It's also in the slide if you go back and look at this video again, or if you can share the video with your colleagues. But yeah, we'd love to have more momentum, getting more community members on board. So, any other questions or thoughts? Oh, Helen's back.
Trying to. Thank you again so much, Ellen. This is awesome. I see Laura was taking some notes about ideas to talk about at the tables for everyone to chat. Thank you, Laura. And I do want to remind everyone that our closing session is coming at 5:30, which means we'll have to leave this session and enter the closing session on Remo. So it won't be a continuation of this room. We'll be going to a different event. So I'm going to release everyone to the tables. You've got 4 minutes. If you can stick around a little bit and have some say hellos. If not, we totally understand. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you. Stay safe.